The summer after high school graduation was supposed to be my launchpad, but instead, I was stranded in a ghost town of forgotten promises. My friends had scattered to colleges across the country, their social media feeds bursting with new dorms and new lives, while I was stuck in my childhood bedroom in Sacramento, staring at the same cracked ceiling. My father, the only family I had left, hadn't called in months. Not since he'd moved to San Francisco with his new husband, leaving me to fend for myself in a house that felt more like a museum of my past. My name is Ethan Carver, and at 19 I was already a footnote in everyone's story. My mother died when I was 6, and Dad, well, he tried, but after coming out and marrying Julian 3 years ago, he seemed to rewrite his life without me in it. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I just felt invisible. The scholarship I'd pinned my hopes on fell through, and the community college I'd enrolled in felt like a consolation prize. My days blurred into a cycle of fast food shifts and late-night scrolls through X, where I'd see Dad's posts about wine tastings and gallery openings with Julian, their smiles polished and perfect. No mentions of me, no invites. One humid August evening, I sat on the porch, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and regret. My phone buzzed, a rare text from Dad. "Hey Ethan, can we talk?" My heart lurched. Was this an apology? A chance to reconnect? I typed back, "Sure," my fingers trembling. An hour later he called, his voice hesitant but warm. "Ethan, I've been a terrible father. Julian and we want you to come live with us in San Francisco. Start fresh. What do you say?" I froze. San Francisco was a world away. Cosmopolitan, vibrant, and intimidating. I'd met Julian only once at their wedding, where he'd been kind but distant, a man who seemed more comfortable with art critiques than small talk. The idea of living with them felt like stepping into a stranger's life. But staying here, in this stagnant town, was suffocating. "Okay," I said, barely audible. "I'll come." The next week, I packed 2 duffel bags and boarded a bus to the city. San Francisco greeted me with fog and a skyline that felt like it belonged in a movie. Dad and Julian's house was a narrow Victorian in no valley, painted sage green, with a garden bursting with roses. Dad hugged me tightly at the door, his eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I got caught up in my new life. I forgot you." Julian stood behind him, offering a quiet smile. "Welcome home," he said, and I wondered if he meant it. Settling in was surreal. The house was filled with art, bold abstracts, and delicate sketches. Julian's work as a gallery curator evident in every corner. My room was small but bright, with a view of the bay in the distance. Dad tried to bridge the gap, asking about my plans, but our conversations felt like rehearsals for a play we hadn't learned. Julian, though, was different. He didn't push. He'd leave books on my nightstand, poetry, mostly, by queer authors like Audre Lorde and Ocean Vuong, or invite me to help in the garden, where we'd work in companionable silence. One afternoon, while pruning roses, Julian asked, "What do you want, Ethan?" "Not what your dad wants for you, but you." I didn't know how to answer. No one had asked me that in years. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe to feel like I belong somewhere." He nodded, his hands steady on the shears. "You will. Give it time." But time wasn't gentle. At the community college I enrolled in, I felt like an outsider among students who seemed to have their lives mapped out. I kept to myself, sketching in the margins of my notebooks, doodles of faces, cityscapes, anything to keep my hands busy. One day, I met Luca, a 20-year-old photography student with a sharp laugh and a habit of wearing mismatched socks. He saw my sketches and grinned. "These are good, man. You ever think about showing them?" I shrugged, embarrassed. "They're just doodles." But Luca was persistent, dragging me to an art club meeting where I met others like me, misfits, dreamers, and a few queer kids who made me feel less alone. Luca was openly gay, unapologetic in a way I envied. He'd talk about his exes, his crushes, his dreams of shooting a photo series on queer love in urban spaces. I hadn't told anyone I was questioning my own sexuality. Not Dad, not Julian, not even myself, not fully. Growing up in Sacramento, I'd buried those thoughts under layers of denial, afraid of what they meant. But Luca's ease, his confidence, cracked something open in me. One night, at a coffee shop near campus, he leaned across the table, his eyes glinting. "Ethan, you ever wonder what it'd be like to just be yourself? No hiding." His words hit like a punch. I wanted to say yes, to confess the questions swirling in my head, but fear clamped my mouth shut. Instead, I changed the subject, asking about his latest project. Luca didn't push, but his question lingered, a seed planted in soil I wasn't ready to tend. Back at home, tensions simmered. Dad was trying too hard, planning family dinners that felt staged. One night, he brought up my future, suggesting I apply to a 4-year university. "You could do so much, Ethan," he said, his voice earnest but edged with expectation. I snapped. "You don't get to decide my life now, Dad. You weren't there." The room went quiet. Julian's hand rested on Dad's arm, a silent signal to let it go. Later, Julian found me in the garden, staring at the stars. "He loves you," he said softly. "He just doesn't know how to show it yet." I wanted to believe him, but love felt like a foreign language I couldn't speak. As the weeks passed, I threw myself into art, sketching more, joining Luca at galleries. I started to see San Francisco differently, its colors, its pulse, its acceptance. But inside, I was still that kid on the Sacramento porch, waiting for someone to remember me. Fall in San Francisco was a kaleidoscope of crisp air and golden light, but inside me, a storm was brewing. Luca's question about being myself haunted me, circling like a hawk. I'd catch myself watching him at art club, the way he moved with purpose, his laughter cutting through the room. I wondered what it would feel like to be that free, to not second-guess every thought, every glance. But admitting I might be gay, or even questioning it, felt like stepping off a cliff. At home, things with Dad were a tightrope. He'd softened since our fight, but his attempts at connection felt clumsy, like he was trying to parent a version of me that didn't exist anymore. Julian, though, was a steady presence. He'd started inviting me to his gallery openings, not as a guest but as his assistant, handing me tasks like arranging displays or greeting visitors. It was his way of including me, and I clung to it. One evening, at a small exhibit in the Mission District, he introduced me to a painter named Marisol, a 30-year-old woman with a warm smile and a buzz cut. "Ethan's an artist too," Julian said, and I blushed, muttering that I just sketched. Marisol laughed. "That's how it starts. Keep going." Her encouragement stuck with me, and I started carrying a sketchbook everywhere, capturing fragments of the city. Cable cars, street musicians, the fog curling over Twin Peaks. Luca noticed, and one day he convinced me to show my work at an art club critique. My hands shook as I laid out my sketches, expecting criticism. Instead, the group was kind, even impressed. Luca's eyes sparkled as he whispered, "Told you, man. You're good." That night, we ended up at a diner, splitting fries and talking until midnight. Luca told me about growing up in Oakland, how he'd come out at 15 and faced his family's rejection. "It hurt," he said, stirring his milkshake. "But I found my people. You will too." I wanted to tell him I was trying, that I was scared, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I asked about his photography, and he lit up, describing a series he was planning on queer couples in everyday moments, holding hands at bus stops, laughing in grocery stores. "It's about love being ordinary," he said. "Not a spectacle, just real." His passion stirred something in me, a longing I couldn't name. I started spending more time with him, joining him on photo walks through the Castro, where rainbow flags fluttered like promises. One afternoon, we stopped at a mural of two men embracing, their silhouettes bold against a sunset. Luca snapped a photo, then turned to me. "You ever been in love, Ethan?" I shook my head, my throat tight. "Me neither," he said, but his eyes lingered on mine, and I felt my heart race. At home, Julian noticed the change in me. "You seem lighter," he said one morning over coffee. I shrugged, but he pressed gently. "Is it Luca?" I froze, my mug halfway to my lips. "He's just a friend," I said too quickly. Julian's smile was knowing but kind. "Friends can change everything," he said, and left it at that. But not everything was easy. Dad and I hit another rough patch when he found out I'd skipped a college counseling session to go to an art show with Luca. "You can't just drift, Ethan," he said, his voice sharp. "You need a plan." I wanted to scream that I was trying to find myself, that I wasn't his project to fix. Instead, I stormed out, ending up at Luca's tiny apartment in Oakland. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a soda and put on a movie. As we sat on his couch, our shoulders brushing, I felt a pull, a desire to lean closer, to cross a line I wasn't sure I was ready for. The next day, I apologized to Dad, but the tension lingered. Julian mediated, suggesting we all go to a pride event in the city to reset. I was nervous, but the energy of the Castro Pride Festival was electric. Music, laughter, people of every age and identity celebrating unapologetically. I saw Luca there, dancing with friends, and when he waved me over, I felt a spark of courage. We danced together, not touching, but close enough that I could feel his warmth. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to hide. Back home, Julian pulled me aside. "You're finding your place, Ethan. Don't rush it, but don't run from it either." His words were a lifeline, but I still felt caught between who I was and who I might become. As I lay in bed that night, sketching Luca's face from memory, I wondered if I was brave enough to step into the unknown. The Pride Festival had cracked my world open, but by winter, I was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't define. Luca and I were inseparable now, spending weekends exploring the city or holed up in the art club studio. His presence was a magnet, pulling me toward a truth I was terrified to face. One freezing December night, as we walked through Chinatown, the lanterns glowing like embers, he grabbed my hand to pull me out of a crowd. He didn't let go. My pulse thundered, but I didn't pull away either. "Ethan," he said, stopping under a streetlight, his breath visible in the cold. "You don't have to say anything, but I like you. A lot." His honesty was a blade, sharp and clean. I wanted to say I liked him too, that I'd been sketching his smile for weeks, that I dreamed of him, but fear choked me. "I need time," I mumbled, and he nodded, his eyes soft but disappointed. "Take all the time you need," he said, and we walked on, hands no longer touching. At home, Julian sensed my turmoil. He'd become my anchor, more than Dad, who was still wrestling with his guilt and expectations. One evening, as we arranged a new exhibit at his gallery, Julian asked about Luca. "He's important to you, isn't he?" I nodded, staring at a painting of two figures blurred together in a storm. "I'm scared," I admitted. What if I'm not ready to be like you and Dad?" Julian set down a frame and looked at me. "You don't have to be like us. You just have to be Ethan, whoever that is." His words echoed Luca's, and they gnawed at me. I started pouring my confusion into my art, sketching scenes of fractured faces, hands reaching but not touching. Luca saw one at a club meeting and went quiet. "This is you, isn't it?" he asked later, pointing to a figure standing alone in a crowd. I didn't answer, but he didn't need me to. He started inviting me to more queer events, poetry slams, drag shows, community dinners, each one chipping away at my fear. I saw people like me, people who'd struggled and found their way, and it gave me hope. But hope was fragile. One night, Dad and I clashed again. He'd found my sketches, the ones of Luca, and asked if I was serious about this art thing. His tone implied it was a phase, not a future. "You don't get it," I snapped. "This is who I am." I stormed out, ending up at a park overlooking the bay. Luca found me there, somehow knowing where I'd go. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside me. I shook my head, tears burning. "I don't know who I'm supposed to be." Luca took my hand, his grip firm. "You're enough, Ethan, just as you are." He leaned in, and for a moment, I thought he'd kiss me. But he didn't, and I hated myself for wanting him to. When I got home, Julian was waiting up. "You're not alone in this," he said. "Your dad's learning too. Give him a chance." The next week, I took a risk. I signed up for a student art show, submitting a piece I'd been working on. A canvas of two hands almost touching, surrounded by vibrant city colors. Luca helped me set it up, his pride in me palpable. At the show, I saw Dad and Julian in the crowd, and my stomach twisted. After, Dad pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice thick. "I'm sorry I've been pushing you. I just want you to be happy." It was the first time I believed him. Luca and I grew closer, but I still hadn't crossed that line. One night, at a rooftop party in the Mission, he pulled me into a quiet corner. "I'm not gonna wait forever, Ethan," he said, half smiling. "But I'll wait a little longer." His words were a challenge, and as I looked at him, the city lights reflecting in his eyes, I felt something shift. I wasn't ready to say the words, but I was ready to try. Spring arrived, painting San Francisco in blooms and possibility, but my heart was a battlefield. Luca's patience was a gift I didn't deserve, and every moment with him pushed me closer to admitting what I'd known for months. I was falling for him, but fear was a stubborn shadow. I'd grown up in a world where being different meant being alone, and even in this city of rainbows, I couldn't shake the dread of what coming out might cost me. Julian saw it all. He'd become more than my father's husband. He was my confidant, my guide. One morning, as we repotted plants in the garden, he told me about his own coming out in his 20s, how he'd lost friends but found himself. "It's not about losing who you were," he said, brushing dirt off his hands. "It's about claiming who you are." I wanted to claim that truth, but the words felt trapped in my chest. Luca, meanwhile, was relentless in his quiet way. He'd text me photos of murals or drag me to open mic nights, each moment a thread pulling me toward him. One rainy afternoon, we ended up at his apartment, soaked and laughing, sorting through his latest prints. He showed me a photo of two men kissing in a park, their joy raw and unfiltered. "This is what I want my work to be," he said. "Real love, no apologies." I looked at him, his damp hair curling against his forehead, and my resolve cracked. "Luca," I said, my voice shaking, "I think I'm gay, and I think I'm in love with you." The silence that followed was deafening. Then he smiled, soft and bright, and pulled me into a hug. "Took you long enough," he whispered. We didn't kiss, not yet, but that moment in his cluttered apartment felt like a beginning. I went home lighter but terrified. Telling Luca was one thing, telling Dad was another. I confided in Julian first. He listened, his face calm but his eyes bright. "You're brave, Ethan," he said. "Your dad will come around. He loves you." That night, I sat Dad down in the living room, my heart pounding. "Dad, I'm gay," I said, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. "And I'm with Luca." He blinked, his face unreadable, then stood and hugged me. "I just want you to be happy," he said, echoing his words from the art show. But there was a strain in his voice, a hesitation I couldn't ignore. The next weeks were a blur of highs and lows. Luca and I were officially together, stealing kisses in alleyways and holding hands at coffee shops. My art flourished, each piece bolder, more honest. But Dad's support felt fragile. He'd smile, ask about Luca, but there was a distance, like he was processing something he couldn't articulate. One night, I overheard him arguing with Julian. "I'm trying," Dad said, his voice breaking, "but it's hard. I wasn't ready for this." Julian's response was firm but gentle. "He's your son, Mark. Love him for who he is." The tension came to a head at a family dinner. Dad made an offhand comment about phases, and I lost it. "This isn't a phase, Dad. This is me." I stormed out, Luca's number already dialed on my phone. He met me at a pier, the bay dark and restless. "He'll get there," Luca said, his hand in mine. "Give him time." But I was tired of waiting for people to catch up to me. Julian found me the next morning in the garden. "Your dad's scared," he said. "Not of you, but of failing you again." He handed me a letter Dad had written, apologizing for his doubts, promising to try harder. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I realized then that Julian wasn't just Dad's husband. He was my father too, in his own way, filling the gaps Dad couldn't. Summer returned, and with it a fragile peace. Luca and I were solid now, our relationship a quiet rhythm of late-night talks and shared dreams. My art was gaining traction. Julian had even gotten one of my pieces into a small gallery show. But Dad and I were still navigating our new normal. His letter had been a turning point, but trust was a slow rebuild. We'd have moments, cooking together, laughing at old movies, where I'd see the father I'd missed. Other times, his questions about Luca felt like tests and I'd bristle. Julian was the bridge. He'd plan outings, hikes in Marin, brunches in the Haight, where we could just be, no pressure. One day, he took us to a queer history exhibit at a museum, where I saw photos of activists from the 80s, their faces fierce and proud. Julian pointed to a man in a grainy photo, his arm around another. "That was my first love," he said quietly. "We fought for every moment we had." His story grounded me, reminding me that love, in any form, was worth fighting for. Luca's photography series was taking shape, and he asked me to model for it. A portrait of us in Golden Gate Park, holding hands under a willow. I was nervous, but his camera made me feel seen, not judged. When he showed me the photo, I barely recognized myself. My smile was unguarded, my eyes alive. "This is you, Ethan," he said. "This is us." I kissed him then, under the willow, and it felt like a promise. But life wasn't all sunlit moments. At college, I faced whispers from a few classmates who'd seen me with Luca, their words sharp with judgment. I ignored them, but it stung. Luca shrugged it off. "Haters gonna hate," he said, but I saw the flicker of hurt in his eyes. I wanted to protect him, to protect us, but I didn't know how. Julian suggested I channel it into my art, and I did, creating a series of sketches about queer resilience, each one a defiance of the world's noise. Dad's progress was uneven. He'd join us at Pride events, smile at Luca, but I could tell he was still adjusting. One night, at a gallery opening, he pulled me aside. "I'm trying, Ethan. I see how happy Luca makes you. I missed so much of your life." His honesty disarmed me. "You're here now," I said, and for the first time I meant it. Then came a curveball. Luca got an offer to study abroad in Paris for a semester, a dream opportunity for his photography. He was torn, and so was I. "Go," I told him, though my heart ached. "We'll make it work." The night before he left, we sat on his roof, the city sprawling below us. "I love you," he said, and I said it back. The words no longer heavy but true. We promised to call, to visit, but the distance loomed like a storm. Julian helped me cope. He'd been through long-distance love before, and his stories of letters, late-night calls, reunions gave me hope. He also pushed me to focus on my art, helping me apply for a local artist residency. When I got in, he celebrated like it was his own victory. "You're building something, Ethan," he said. "Not just art, but a life." As Luca's plane took off, I stood in the garden, sketching the roses Julian and I had planted. Dad joined me, silent at first. "I'm proud of you," he said finally. "And I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you had to hide. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For now." Luca's absence was a quiet ache, but it taught me resilience. We talked daily, his voice crackling through video calls from Paris, his photos filling my inbox with glimpses of his new world. I threw myself into the artist residency, creating a series called Roots, inspired by the garden Julian and I tended, each piece a meditation on growth and belonging. The work was personal, raw, sketches of Luca's hands, Dad's hesitant smile, Julian's steady gaze. When the residency culminated in a show, I invited Dad and Julian, nervous but hopeful. The gallery was packed, the air humming with chatter. My pieces hung proudly, and for the first time I felt like an artist, not just a kid with a sketchbook. Dad walked through slowly, lingering on a drawing of him and Julian in the garden. "This is us," he said, his voice thick. "You see us." Julian squeezed my shoulder, his pride wordless but clear. Luca, watching via a live stream, texted me, "You're incredible. I'm so proud." My heart swelled, but the distance between us stung. After the show, Dad and I really talked, for the first time in years. He admitted he'd been scared of losing me again, of not knowing how to be a father to the person I was becoming. "I was wrong to push you," he said. "I see you now, Ethan. I see you." It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was honest, and that was enough. Luca came back in the spring, his arms full of stories and photos. We reunited at the airport, our embrace a collision of relief and joy. Back in San Francisco, we rebuilt our rhythm, stronger now, tempered by distance. I introduced him to Dad and Julian as my boyfriend, no hesitation. Dad shook his hand, his smile genuine. Julian winked at me, a silent "I told you so." My final piece for the residency was a mural, painted on a community center wall in the Castro. It showed a family, not just blood, but chosen, hands linked under a sky of vibrant color. On a bench nearby, I painted the words, "Love wins," a nod to the chalkboard in Julian's garden. At the unveiling, Luca stood beside me, his hand in mine, while Dad and Julian clapped from the crowd. I realized then that I wasn't forgotten anymore. I'd found my place, not just in their home, but in the world. Years later, I'd look back on that summer after graduation as the moment I was lost, and the years that followed as the ones where I was found. Julian didn't just take me into his home. He gave me a family, a chance to be myself. Dad learned to love me as I was, not as he'd imagined. And Luca? He was my heart, my mirror, showing me I was enough. Together, we built a life where no one was forgotten, where love wasn't just a word but a promise kept.